Dom and Johnny in the morning. Today, I figured we could talk about leadership. And the reason it's so, we've touched on it with other topics. Like when we talked about what uniforms everyone wears, we kind of like pointed out, a level 2 instructor wears this, or a level 4 instructor wears this. What do the levels mean? But also there's the layer of the 5 animals. We talked about the 5 animals in relation to living your best life, but there are some specific lenses when it comes to our leadership program. So we could talk about leadership big, we could talk about leadership as it relates to our instructor pathway. Where do you want to start today?
Maybe a definition.
Yeah. This is something that business managers have been asking themselves forever. So in our school, leadership is a way to practice the 5 animal mindsets both on and off the mats. And really, the 5 animals, as we talked about in that past episode, are really just lenses to view situations through. And they provide 5 strategies, any of which could work. But you may find personally, and there's the royal you, situationally, some may feel better than others. And usually, we have the potential for all 5 within us, although we usually have one that we prefer and one that usually comes out when our back is against the wall. And then as we practice the other ones that support it, that's where we really unlock what we call the dragon, which is the 5th animal. So for our leadership students, which are for our Black Belt Club members, it's for students to learn about these animals, some tips of how to practice them, at school or at work or wherever it may be appropriate. And when they've practiced that, then they can start dipping their toes into our instructor training pathway, which, you're one of our prime examples of an instructor who did instructor training for martial arts, and you're still a martial arts teacher, but you went to a job outside of the martial arts and was able to demonstrate, I've put in this much work into leadership and instructor training. This is how I think it will be applicable to this job unrelated to the martial arts. So that's kind of, I think, the summary of leadership from a broader view. Did you have anything to add to it?
Sure. Yeah, I like, so the 5 animal thing is cool because I feel like leadership is almost like front position, where you have the fist, and that's all your martial abilities, or in this case, the 5 animals, and then the hand, that gives you the wisdom knowing when it's appropriate to use it is, when it's appropriate to use those animals and how. Yeah. Because if I get really good at snake, but then I use snake for every situation, then I'm probably not acting like a good leader. I can almost be a feared leader, maybe if I was 100% snake all the time, but not someone that people want to follow. So I think that's the only thing I'd add.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because most people, from my experience, get really good at an animal. But when that animal doesn't work, most of the time they try to find complementary personalities. And while that is a decent strategy, also the self-development of getting good at multiple strategies benefits everybody as well. Mm-hmm. So if you have, a team of dragons that are able to shift fluidly and dynamically, I think that you're getting more than a team of a snake personality or a tiger personality, where now they're just a little more isolated or compartmentalized. Mm-hmm. Which I don't remember if I talked about it in 5 Animals, but what you said about the snake leadership did just have me remember something Ken once said. And he was saying it in relation to sparring, but I absolutely think that it applies to leadership as well, which is, if you're a little unbalanced as a leader, a lot of times you can diagnose it through the feelings that are created from either your followers or employees or students or whatever. So one of the things that was interesting is he said tiger personalities create fear. You're so afraid of poking the tiger and getting this overwhelming amount of energy that you're afraid or anxious all the time. Whereas cranes will lead to frustration. So if you're sparring someone that's got a really strong guard, really good at not being there when you want to hit them, you end up frustrated but not fearful. So if you're a leader and you tend to be kind of vague, or you don't take action at the right time, you take disproportionate amount of time to think through something. Everyone else ends up really frustrated because they just want to do something. Mm-hmm. So and I think Snake was angry, because the Snake personality will say the thing you don't want to hear because they're thinking it through an objective lens. And so without the compassionate side, you end up feeling like really just furious because you're getting something reflected that you're not supposed to. I can't remember what leopard is. I don't know if he mentioned leopard. My instinct would be you also get angry, but after you can do anything about it. Yeah. So it's kind of like, I don't know if you remember Dane Cook, but Dane Cook had that whole thing about how girls will mental ninja you in arguments, yeah. And it'll be like she'll say you're stupid like your father, and then you'll fester on it, but won't realize you're festering on it until 2 days later you're like, my father is a brilliant man, okay. And you're like, my father bought me oodles of noodles when I needed it most, and yeah, I don't know. But I didn't know if you had anything to say on that.
The Dane Cook thing threw me off. No, I agree. I agree with all that. And but yeah, because I think I think it's changed when I think of the way you're talking about being frustrated and stuff like that. I noticed that it's changed over the roles I've had. When I was teaching here before, there was, I think, 4 head instructors, and then Steph was the chief instructor, and then obviously Ken was the director. And I had responsibility, but not the ultimate responsibility.
Right.
And it made me be more leopard.
Yeah.
And sometimes monkey.
Yeah.
There's sometimes chaos energy. But when I'm running classes, at my school, I feel more tiger. Because because I have a lot more of that compassion for my students, because I feel like I'm responsible for them.
Yeah.
So I become, very passionate about them, but I also, have to have a little bit, more control of the classroom than I did when I had a team with me.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've gravitated more towards tiger, but then I supplement with leopard, and I supplement with crane.
Yeah.
So
it is a seasonal thing. So when I worked at Subway, it was a very jarring transition, but I had to shift gear real quick into Snake, because I was working with lazy teenagers. Mm-hmm. And I was a teenager too, but the idea being that, there was a checklist, and they would spend most of the time justifying why they didn't have to do the thing on the checklist. And so the nice thing about that job is, in a lot of ways, it was objective. Either you restocked the chips or you didn't. So having that kind of detail-oriented approach, I had to get good at that job in order to do well. Mm-hmm. And when it came to when I was more of the certified level 4 instructor role, which I do want to get into, I also had to be Snake, but it felt like I had to because it was the gap that needed to be filled, based on the other personalities around. There was a lot of crane personality when it came to conflict. There was a lot of leopard personality when it came to excitement about new ideas. But a lot of times when you have a lot of innovators in the same room, there's not a lot of discussion of how it will actually work. And because of that, there are a lot of blind spots, and things go way worse than if we had just taken a breath and, slowed down into the corner to speed up instead of trying to speed up and go off track. So that being said, when I became more of the leadership role, really had to shift away from Snake. because that wasn't what was needed anymore. So I actually had to do a little bit more Crane, but a lot more Tiger, I feel like. And when the boundary was set, it had to be less subtle. Not rude, but just a little more overt, and a little bit more from an emotional place, because the dynamics just shifted. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like we talked about with the uniform episode, in our school, leadership is really the first step. It's to have students start to get acquainted with some language, the energy that you want as an instructor or a leader. And then after a while, you can join Storm, which is where you're actually allowed to come in to lower ranking classes and be a role model student. But the real meat is our 5-level leadership pathway. And the 5 levels are kind of interesting because lightly they each correspond to an animal skill. So the first level we train our instructors to is the listening level. And when they take on level 1, they go from being a Storm member who's actively helping out to a fly on the wall. We make them sit down with a workbook, and they have to just pay attention to how the instructors present things, how the students respond, and full immersion into the language that we use. So really, they're learning a Crane-first approach, which is different than a lot of other martial arts instructing programs. I feel like a lot of other programs start with Tiger, start with high energy, high rev, and being kind of like a game show host, as opposed to, being someone who is quieter but able to listen and say the right thing rather than an entertaining thing.
Yeah. No, yeah. And that's interesting, obviously, because, it was kind of like that when I originally went through it. But, things have changed over the years. We would come in and do, and I should preface this that when I started, anyone that's listened before knows that I started a little bit older. I was 15 when I started.
Yep.
So it was different for children. But for the most part, we had a internship weekend, and you'd come for 16 hours of leadership training, which was awesome.
Yep.
And then you became an intern.
Yeah.
If you were old enough. And then throughout the year, you did do listening, but you're also actively teaching. So this is cool because it breaks it up. Because I feel like the listening part did get swept under the rug sometimes, just because I think it split the focus.
Yeah.
And I think that it is more than doable if you're crazy like some of us were, where we were in the dojo 6 days a week.
Yeah.
Potentially here all day, every day, and then, working the night shift
Yeah.
at FedEx Ground. So, I feel like the way we do it now makes way more sense for more people to be able to be successful.
Yeah, well, so for anyone listening that's more familiar with the current pathway, that would be like you're a fresh 14-year-old and you get thrust straight into level 3. Because what used to be an intern instructor is now what we call level 3 instructor. And one of the things I noticed is for the ones that started with Storm, because we don't even actually let anyone do level 1 until they've done at least a little bit of Storm, to make sure it's a good fit. The level 2 instructors we have now are more skillful than the level 3 instructors that were getting their intern certification because they just have more experience. Like, it's not talent or anything. It's just because they've gone through a more digestible track over a longer period of time, they just have more practice and they have more skill. So when it comes to level 3, it now feels not like, oh, you're a brand new level 3 and there's all these bumps and bruises you have to go through. It's like, oh, thank goodness they're allowed to do what I know they're capable of, which is a much better feeling. Yeah.
It would be like learning a form without ever practicing any basics.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you could do it and you could get through it, but you're learning the basics as you're learning the form.
Right.
So it's going to take a lot more time than if you just learned the basics first and separated them. It's funny. Your wonderful sister,
Yeah.
when she was young, her and another student named Kelsey, who I know you know.
Yep.
But I remember being a brown belt intern and teaching them as kids.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if it was Stephanie or Kelsey that said to me, but they said, "Why are we listening to you? You're only a brown belt."
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a very interesting experience, especially when you've never done any teaching before.
Yeah.
And then you're trying to do your best.
Well, and I guess that's the other thing is, there were times I was a 3rd degree black belt and I'd have a student basically, "Why should I listen to you? You're only a 3rd degree," which for like other systems, that's like 3rd degree black belt is like, you're super far along the path. And I think what it highlights is less a student's disrespect, but more that the rank matters if it's evident that you aren't teaching to a level of confidence that would make sense. So it doesn't matter. There have been times I've had a student that's like a green belt, but they've been through a lot of storm or level 1 teaching. So if they go to give someone advice, they know what they're talking about. So it doesn't matter that they're a green belt or a 3rd degree black belt. The rank doesn't matter because the precision of what they're offering as advice stands on its own. So I think that one of the beauties of the level program is that, yes, there's a minor, rank matters. Obviously, if you're a brown belt, you can't be teaching an advanced black belt class. But on the other hand, a lot of the basics are taught so early on, like from a teaching perspective, that a lot of times an instructor that's trained as an instructor well is able to give such targeted feedback that it stands on its own.
Yeah. I think our system is interesting, at least from a curriculum-specific perspective. So, Shaolin Temple.
Yep.
They have, 5 animal kung fu and some other animals. But they would consider that each animal to be its own discipline that could take a lifetime to master.
Right.
And we have it all crammed into one system, with karate and kempo. And I think that because of that, I could be working with a 1st degree black belt who has just done so much deep diving into a certain part of the art.
Yeah.
To the point where I would want their input.
Yeah.
I would want to know, be like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Because maybe they've delved into China, which I haven't touched a lot of,
right.
Or,
it's good grappling, good luck touching.
I've never seized the opportunity. But yeah, I think at least with our system in particular, from a material standpoint, I think it opens it up for people of lower rank to have something valuable to contribute to higher rank. So I think, even if a 1st degree was teaching a class of 2nd degrees, they would probably have something that they've excelled at that they could lean on to teach, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the benefits of having kind of like a broad curriculum. I know that can be a point of criticism from certain martial artists because, there's a point where you have so many different things, you're not really good at any one thing. But then there's the opposite too, which is if you're too specialized, you lack versatility. So there's like a Goldilocks-like balance between width and depth in terms of the different, martial arts, So level 1 is listening, and that's mostly crane skills, because ultimately, even if you're a level 5 instructor, that just means you should be a master level 1 instructor, where you're really good at listening and paying attention, and looking at things from a broader perspective so you can get specific. Level 2 is refinement. And this is an interesting one because this is where A lot of students that, if they're like great academic students, they're really good at, filling out the workbook and answering the questions. Sometimes they have a little bit of trouble transitioning to now you have to actually talk to the person. Whereas on the other hand, you might have a personality type that wants to talk and wants to engage, but going through the patience practice of level 1 can be difficult. But then they can kind of relax once they're a level 2 instructor because now it's something more familiar. And I think it's good to have kind of both sides of that coin. Interestingly, though, I find that refinement, like the animal kind of attached to it, is snake. So you're going from learning the listening skills of crane to having a more sophisticated animal in snake. And the idea with snake is that ideally support instructors should not be distracting from lead instructors. So, and I'm sure you've had this before where you're trying to teach something and then there's a really loud support instructor that's distracting the student from what you're trying to do because either they're going too in depth with it or volume-wise they're just too loud. So, whereas with snake, a lot of times you're trying to use an ounce to move 1,000 pounds. So it's like little adjustments like lifting up the elbow position, making sure a horse stances, the toes of the feet are pointed forward in a horse stance. These little quick adjustments like a snake that's just like bam. And it's not emotional, it's just these little things that can help a student stay stronger without distracting from the lead instructor's efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. And the less words, the better.
Yeah.
And I think that, what's really cool about that is I feel like that is where beyond leadership, that is probably where you take your art to the next level because you start noticing those nuance and, you're watching the class and you're actually looking for things to correct.
Yeah.
And I think that changes the way your brain works and it starts making you think about your own art because all of a sudden while you're working, you catch yourself in the mirror, and all of a sudden it's like looking at a class, and you're like, "Oh my goodness!" Back straight, hips under, all those important things. So I think that's a really, probably a really cool step to kind of catapult your own understanding of the martial art too.
Well, and you said a key thing, which is concise. So many times talking to different people, oftentimes they use 300 words when 3 will do. And I think that one of the benefits, because we do have age requirements for our instructors, so you can't even start level 1 until you're at least 12 because of how deep a lot of the ideas are. They're very abstract. So you need a mind that's in a developmental place that's able to start grappling with abstract. When it comes to level 2, you have to be at least 14, and the idea is that you have to organize your thoughts. So because we have 45 minutes in a class, if we spend 20 minutes trying to describe a front kick, when again 3 words will do, then we're wasting the student's time, and it's more likely to be unproductive.
Yeah.
So, but once you're able to be concise, that's where you're able to start to open up a little bit more. So level 3, which was, in the past a certified intern instructor, white top, blue bottoms, level 3 is all about communication. So it's how do you communicate the information in a memorable way? So because how many times have we attended a clinic, the instructor's doing something really cool, and we have no idea what we learned afterward. And yes, we may have flashes here or there, but for the most part, it wasn't a transformative experience. It was just a feel-good experience. Yeah, so how do you make it memorable and transformative? And also, how do you just make it more entertaining? So whereas most, or at least a lot of schools would start with the more, charisma and cadence and kind of the showcase personality, we wait a little bit farther down so that you balance out the system first, then you add energy to it. So I've always viewed this one as more tiger. You're moving from the yin animals into the yang animals. And then from there, you get to the advanced cat, which is leopard. So level 4 instructors, the big jump between them, level 1, you're sitting and observing. Level 2, you're paired with a level 4 or level 5 instructor where you're supporting and giving little changes that make a big difference. Level 3, you have to go through a test where parents in the lobby have to grade you while watching you teach their kid under the supervision of a level 4 or 5 instructor. And basically they have to say they would trust their students' progress to you alone. And so
I didn't even know that. That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's
so
cool.
We got much more in depth with the diagnostic testing of what allows you to graduate from one level to another. So level 3, the big jump is, you could have a group of 4 or 5 kids and you alone can be trusted with advancing their martial arts progress. So while you are helping at level 2, you have a watchful eye over you. You're not just left to your own devices. And you have to go through about 2 years of that before you're allowed to be on your own, which is why level 3 is around 16. And it's also the age you can be employed if the school has a need. Then level 4, the next step is you can run the whole class on your own, bringing them through a full learning loop of, introducing whatever the topic is, and then coming up with an elongated lesson that brings them through an entire 45-minute period. So in a lot of ways, you're taking what you're doing at level 3, but instead of being trusted for 10 minutes at a time, you have to now do it for 45. And the main lesson of level 4 is adaptability. Because you may go in being like, today I'm going to teach them 3 combination and this principle of 3 combination. And then you go in and you have them falling on the ground and they're not listening or they can't remember 7 combinations. So you have to change your plan. Sometimes totally, sometimes a little. But knowing how big the adaptations have to be to produce the best result.
Yeah, and and that brings up an interesting kind of leadership point. Is not making any promises.
Yeah.
Because I've had times where I've thought, I need to give this kid a red star today, and the worst thing you could do is even hint that they're going to get a red star, because someone who does one pinyin very well one day, all of a sudden they get it next week, and it's gone.
Yeah.
Completely gone. And you're like, what happened? And if I was like, oh, you're going to get a red star today, if it's, sometimes it can be used as like a behavioral thing and say, I know you're ready for your red star.
Yeah.
Like, if you have a great day, no falling on the ground, stuff like that. Kind of gets them excited and they feel like they want to amp up the black belt energy. Mm-hmm. But then they might not remember one pinyin.
Right,
right. So it's hard. It's easy to get in that, habit of, this is what I'm doing today. Just like you said.
Yep.
And then, if it doesn't turn out the way you expect it to, at least if you didn't make any promises.
Yeah.
Same with, I do that with testing too. I know people that I've worked with that would be like, hey, there's a test coming up on this date, be ready. It's like, no, don't tell them that.
Yeah.
What if they're not ready?
Yeah. Well, and that's where, again, if you get good at level 3, and sometimes when you level up, I get this sense that we think of increasing level like a video game. You get enough experience points, you're now level 60 instead of 59. A lot of times you get lessons of lower levels revealed when you go to the next level. So you really can't appreciate some of the lessons of 2nd degree black belt until you're a 3rd degree black belt and you're trying to learn Ningli South and all of a sudden things aren't working right. You actually need to go back, potentially a few levels and work on some older skills to get strong. So in a lot of ways, what you described, which I've definitely had too, in some ways it's a level 1 skill. What's been the pattern of their memory of one pinyin? So if, for 5 weeks they were super strong, and then 1 week, the day you wanted to give them their red star, they can't remember anything, well, 5 out of 6 times they're doing it well, so what's wrong today? Sometimes it's a level 3, it's a communication thing. Like, I found that, what I tell students is to earn a star, there are really 2 big things you need to show me. Can you remember your material, and can you behave? And if you're not checking off one of those boxes on any given day, it's not the day for you. So, and it's super upfront. So when a kid's falling on the ground, it's like, hey, I was going to give you a star, and I'm not going to give it to you today because you fell on the ground. And usually I usually pre-frame it beforehand. So it's like, hey, you know, you have a habit of falling on the ground. If you don't fall on the ground and you can remember your stuff, it's a star today. And then later it's like, hey, do you remember falling on the ground? Yeah. Well, that's a box we didn't check. So, and it's not personal. It's just, you know, it's clear.
Back to stocking the chips or not again.
Yeah. And that's a snake lesson too. It's so funny how tiger and snake, like, they sometimes, it's easy to mistake one for another. But like that clarity helps drive their understanding, as Ken would say. And a lot of times with adaptability, we try to get so fun. A lot of times we can lose the clarity, you know. But that is an element of level 4 as well. Is when you're a level 3 instructor, you're trying to help make the experience memorable, and you really only have 10 minutes. So even if you want to do something creative, you don't have a lot of time to do a lot that's creative. Whereas if you have 45 minutes, there's a lot that you can do in 45 minutes, and you have a lot of room to be creative, come up with games with combinations and stuff. So in a lot of ways, you're going from just teaching to really making learning fun. That's like the benefit of level 4. And then level 5 is mentorship. So that's kind of the level we're at. And the only jump is that you're going from teaching students to teaching teachers as well as teaching students. This one would be Dragon, ideally, although, again, Dragon is not a tenured position. It's something you flow in and out of over time. And the other difference with level 5 is just the level of responsibility. So rather than being responsible for an individual class, you're responsible for a student's training arc. So, you know, you're the one responsible for bringing them from white to yellow to potentially black belt. And also not only being clear on what they need to accomplish today, being clear on what the journey looks like going forward. This is where I feel like a lot of my instructing training has grown immensely over the past, 2 or 3 years, is before, I had some principles I knew, but when it came to like teaching a second degree and being like, this is how you get to third degree, I was very unclear. And so I've gotten a lot of insight into, very specifically, this is what a first degree should look like when they're ready for second degree. This is what a second degree should look like ready for third degree. And I'm not going to say I'm confident, but I'm clearer probably from third degree moving to fourth degree. Fourth degree to mastery, I just did it. It's going to take me a while before I have any sort of confidence what it should look like on the other side. But I feel like for most students, if you can get them to fourth degree, that's already a huge accomplishment for both them and for you. So yeah. Dom and Johnny in the morning.